Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So before we even start with anything, I'm just gonna go through like why I use DaVinci Resolve and explain a little bit of the stuff in there. And if you're using a different program, you might find it a little bit similar to what I'm doing. But what I've seen so far, a lot of people would take their clips and color grade it in DaVinci, and then they would go and take out those clips that are already color graded and then edit them in Final Cut Pro.
Mm.
So that's and the good thing about DaVinci is that it's free if you don't use anything other than you know, the basic stuff. If you wanted to do something that's more advanced, there is like a, I think, a $300 fee just to purchase a license. But I honestly haven't seen a reason to upgrade because the stuff that they're using with the license is regarding like really advanced cameras that if you're shooting raw, you have to, you know, it kind of unlock some certain lots and stuff like that. Um, and I haven't found a reason, unless you were using like a really, really expensive camera, then it's probably a good idea to upgrade that because it will help you with the color grading and whatnot. But basically, this is kind of very similar to what you can see in Final Cut and Premiere Pro. I have my media pool, which I already have all of my clips, and I've just dragged and dropped all of my clips in here. And all of these are pretty much just pictures. I got some from Star Wars and some from, uh, you know, Bad Boys, Get Out, and a lot of other ones. And we're just going to go through all of the color grade. But we're not going to cover this tab because this tab is the editing tab. We're just going to go into the color grading tab. So we're going to start with the color grading. And basically, the layout is if you have your gallery, which we're going to cover later on. I'm just going to delete that now. You have a LUT, which you can download your LUTs and put them in there. Or if you have like a look that you want, or if you have a camera, you can just go, it's like, hey, I have a Sony camera, I can just go in and drag and drop the LUT. And you have the media pool, which is all of the clips that you have, but usually I don't use that because it's already in there. You have a timeline, which tells you where is your timeline is. And this one is the clips. So you can keep it on if you want, you can remove it if you want more real estate to work with what you have. And the main thing on DaVinci is the note system. You notice in every other program, they have this thing where you have layers. So I can just add another layer. I can just add another like effect on top. I can just go into a transition. But when it comes to DaVinci Resolve, they use something called the node system. And the node system is very similar to the layer system, but except instead of having every layer on top, it just adds a node and you just keep adding nodes to the side. So if you think of it as you're doing something like that, then it looks very similar to the layer system. And that's how they do the stuff in the DaVinci Resolve. But we're just going to cover that later on. Just wanted to show you. This one is the open effects, which has all the different effects, but we're not going to use that today because we're just going to use the very basic way of how to grade your image, and we're going to go with that. And the light box is just a different layout for what you have. The main power of DaVinci is the bottom half of the screen. So you have this one, it will tell you everything about if you're shooting raw, then this will come in handy, but we're not shooting in raw. This one is the color matching. If you have, I don't know, if you've seen the, let me show you something
here. One of these.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. So if you can see with Cam's, he has this. So if you have that in the beginning of your clip, you can just click the color and match it, and it will pretty much kind of balance your image. And but that's very advanced stuff. I don't have that yet. I plan to get it in the future, but it's very comes in handy. And you notice with all of the movies, when they start, they have this thing that comes in and they have to say action, and it's black and white, and they use that also to do some white balance as well. So it always comes in handy. This one is the primary color grade that you can go and change. So you have something called lift, gamma, gain, and offset. And we're going to cover that when we start to grade. In here, it's pretty much the same thing. And this one is the primary. So what we're going to use mainly in this section is this tab over here. We're going to use something called the primary color, and we're going to go with the wheel. So in the primaries, there's something called the wheels and something called the log. And I'm going to show you what is the difference, even though they look the same. I'm going to show you how they look after we finish just showing you what we're going to use in here. The HGR is an upgrade that they added in Davinci Resolve, but we're not going to cover today. It does a little bit of change, tinkering, small changes to the image, but that's very advanced. We're not going to use that today. RGB mixer, we don't use that, and the motion effects, we're not going to use that today. In here, you're going to see a bunch of different things. This one is the curves, and the curves is pretty much the same as your log wheel, except that you can just go in the curves and do it in here, while you can go in the highlights and update. And I'm going to show you how to do that, so don't worry about it. And everything else here is not related to color grading, so we're not going to cover it. But you can do your tracking, you can do your stabilization in here. So it's really good if you're doing your editing, but that's not necessary for now. And the last thing that I wanted to cover is something called the scopes. And I'm going to click on expand in here just to show you how it looks like. So basically the scopes is how your picture is going to look like if you're just relying on data. So if I click on each picture, you're going to notice the picture looks a little bit different. And basically the scope is what the picture looks like in data. So if you see there is a face in here, that's her face. That's how this looks. Let's just take a look at something that's more extreme. Okay, like this one. So this one shows that there is a face and there is a little bit of brightness on each side. So you can see the face is a little bit darker in the center, and the sides are a little bit brighter. So basically, it just translates the picture exactly how it looks, just with color spectrum. So we use RGBs, is red, green, and blue.
Can you show the Princess Leia still again?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can see that black line, that black vertical line.
Yeah.
On the scopes.
Yeah, so you see that one line.
Yeah.
Is shown there. Actually, I have a better picture. Let me see if I can add that in there. Let's see.
And on the scopes, a 0 is black and 100 is white.
Yeah, yeah. And I was gonna go through that with.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through what these do actually. So let me just add this picture. So this is also, I found this one very kind of illuminating. So okay, so let's just say, so this is a picture. You see there is a white and black, and you can see in here. So it goes from bright. So the highest point is how bright it is, and 0 is the darkness. So it goes from bright to dark, bright to dark, bright to dark. And then you get to see his hair, which is there. It's very close to 0. And then you get to see the skin. And you're going to notice a lot that the skin, because most of it, like under the skin, there is we all have blood, and the blood is red. So you're gonna notice in most of the skin tones, the blood is very dominant, even though it's not visible. We all see the different skin tones, but you're gonna notice that the red color is very dominant in, I think, like 90% of all of the case studies that we're gonna do today. And most normally because you see the lips is red, you see that the red is dominating, and see like he has a little bit more scars than that. And really, I think that this one like really shows like how the color spectrum. Um, any questions so far? Am I going too fast? Does anyone have any questions?
Is the magenta and green on those bright parts, is that like what you see when you see chromatic aberration?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically what people try and use the grades for. Like most of the time you will find people when you go on YouTube, they're actually looking at the data and they're trying to match the data to what they have done before. And mainly today, I wanted to show you how you can use these to try and have a very consistent grading for all of your videos moving forward. The one thing I wanted to show you here, the most important one for skins, is this one. It's called the vector scope. And the vector scope has something called show skin tone indicator. And the skin tone indicator, it shows you a wheel. And the wheel is just like, this is the red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. And it shows you where is all of your color kind of falling into that spectrum. And you can see that the whole image is falling into this side of the spectrum. So let's just say, for example, I want to move everything into the blue. And see, the whole thing is moving towards the blue because the whole image looks very blue, right? And if I move it to the red, now I'm in the red, the yellow, it's moving towards the yellow, and so forth. And also keep in mind, look at this. When I move this red, if I move it into the opposite direction, this whole image is moving. The whole thing is like the red is almost not dominant anymore. And now you see the green is dominant. And you can translate that in the image, the green is dominant. So that kind of gives you an idea of how these work when you are seeing. So whatever you're seeing in here, it has to make sense with what you're seeing in there. Okay. But let's just jump into what are these and what is the difference. So I have a very great um, like a picture with a gradient on it. And I just wanted to show you what each of these do. So you have, with the primary wheel, you have something called lift, gamma, and gain. And you have offset. And then you have, in your log wheels, have something called shadow, midtone, and highlights. They all look very similar, but take a look at this. I'm gonna take out my scopes and just gonna go and play with each one and show you what each of those does. You see a lot of people, let's say they are playing with the curves, and the curves is pretty much the same as your log. And you've seen that with Ali when he kind of added a little bit of contrast to do his thumbnails. When you add contrast, it adds, it changes the gradient into a line, because what it does, it changes your black skin tones, like on your shadows, and it crushes them to the point that it is almost absolute, if you have white and black. And that's what the contrast does. But if you don't want to do that with the skin tone, because when you do that, you're gonna have a very bright area, which usually is your forehead and your cheeks, and then everything else is gonna be like really red. Right? So if we, let's say, for example, we're just gonna go back to Princess Leia, and if I increase the contrast, you pretty much exaggerate everything. And that's what it does when you add the contrast. So basically contrast, you want to try and not to play too much with it unless you want to add a little bit more dramatic look. And that's how it usually does. And if you see how it does in here, it takes the line and it kind of adds a little bit of curve to the top and bottom. And that's what basically you can do with this one. So this one acts the same way. And now I just added the contrast. And what the curves is something really, really simple. If you think about it that way. So the curve is the first third is your highlights. So if you see when you do that, your highlights are getting up. And this side is your shadows. And the center is your midtones. So if I move my midtones, you see I can move my midtones there. I want to have my shadows crushed in here, or I can have them crushed on this side. I can just move that in there. And you can do that either with here, or you can do it in there. So let's just go back into the highlights and shadows and show you what it looks like. So if you do that, I did a curve, but wait, it's not the same as what we've done here, because this is what happens. So the highlights, when you go into here, it only controls this. It only controls your shadows. Sorry, it only controls your highlights, and it kind of moves them into the midtones. And if you move your shadows, it does the same thing. And
Has he gone off for everyone else?
it moves our because sorry.
You're back.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I think I got cut off. But was that clear, or did it make sense?
I think it was clear. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I know it. I'm jumping right into it because I think you probably you need to know what these does because you might be overwhelmed. Well, as soon as you look at them, you don't know what each dial does. And I just wanted to show you really what is the effect, because all of these are playing the same role, but I know it's a little bit advanced, and if it's recorded, you can just go in and practice with it and try it with your own images, and it's probably gonna click after a couple of tries. So, but the highlights basically is this, and this is the midtones. But the wheels they behave a little bit different. So the wheels act, they have the whole curve, and the whole curve kind of moves down with it. So if you go into the game, you see the whole curve is falling down. But if I do the same thing with the highlights, it doesn't take the whole curve down. It actually stops at the midtones, and it only applies this side of the curve, but it doesn't apply for the whole image. So what that tells me is you have your gain actually applies to the whole image as a whole. But if you actually just want to isolate a highlight, you can do that in your log wheel. So your log wheel and your log and the wheel are behave very similar, but they do different things to the image. So I'm just going to recap again, sorry. So when you go to your wheels, the wheels are your curves. So the wheels, when you go down, it applies for the whole image. But when you go with your log, which is this, it only applies for your highlights. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So now we're just going to go into next thing. So you have your temperature, which is applies blue and yellow. And you have your tints, which has magentas and green. Then you have the contrast, which is this. And see, when you add a little bit of color, this is what happens, because the contrasts kind of adds, it just gives you absolutes. So the more you add into the colors, it's gonna show that. Let's just go back to where it was before. Okay. Then you have your color boost, which is your kind of like a saturation. So the color boost and saturation behave the same way. And then you have your hues. When you click here, the stuff changes a little bit, but not much. You just have your same color boost, so we're not going to do anything. Anyways, I know this is a mouthful and it's a lot of stuff, but the main reason I just wanted you to go take a look and play around with it and see what each of those does before you do anything. But now I just wanted to go and jump into the skin tones, and I'm just going to go into Princess Leia to begin with, and wanted to go into what are skin tones and why I think Hollywood is doing the same thing for pretty much when they deal with skin tones. So basically, now we know what the scopes are. So this is your brightest and this is your darkest. Just at a glance, we're just going to go through each of the images and let's just see. So the first image, it caps at 640. So this is the brightest. And when you have like a landscape, they go up to 860 or 890. We're just gonna go and see something else. See, like this one is a little bit foggy. They play the highlights up to like 700s. Let's just go to this one. See the highlights, they go close to 1,000, but nothing is clipping. Just go to this, 800s. Even though this is very bright, it doesn't go past 1,000. And this one is, even though it looks like white, but it's not actually pure white, it's actually a little bit green. So what that tells you, like when they grade their image, they kind of stay in the parameters of those scopes. They try and not to go over 1,000, and they not try and go anything less than 0. Even this one, you see in here, even though it looks like it's black, but if you look at the scopes, it's barely touching the 0. And they pretty much want to make sure that the balance, that the image is so balanced and the colors are readable. The colors kind of show up, because if you clip, let's say if I add a contrast, so everything gets stretched out and you lose a lot of information. And the job of the color grading is to keep the information visible, because most people have different, like each TV has a different way of showing the image, and they want to pretty much have a standard. So they have a monitor that have the same standard, and they get everything to be done the same way. So if you're taking it on your TV, it's going to look very similar. And if you notice like if you see everything on your phone, and sometimes you look at the screen, if you're watching a YouTube video, the YouTube video will sometimes look better on your phone. And because the screens are made different. But when you look at the phones are done like Apple is doing this thing where they're having the standard to be done the same. So everyone having the same experience when they buy the iPhone. And they're trying to do the same thing with all of the other phones. But let's say if someone is buying a Samsung phone, the screen is going to look the same and you're going to get the same information. So basically what they're doing is, like when you go to watch a movie in the cinema is going to show you the same colors no matter where you go. If I'm watching it in England and watching it in Canada or watching it in Egypt or South Africa, the colors have to look the same. It doesn't matter how the screen is going to look, but if you have the same information to show, it's going to look very, very similar. So now let's just jump into the skin of the So I'm just gonna do something a little bit advanced here. I'm just gonna isolate the skin. And I just wanted to show you how the skin actually looks, so we can try and understand how they grade their skin. So if you see in here, I just isolated Princess Leia's skin tone, and you notice that the red is a little bit dominant. And she also have also green and blue because these are RGBs. If you take a look in here, so this is just her skin. And there is a little bit of red, which is very dominant, and everything else is in here. So I'm just going to show you another one. So this is another one. You notice that the red is dominant, and everything is pretty much in tune. In same thing in here. But notice that they use the skin doesn't go past 640. This one is a little bit, but it's just a red, so that means that he has a little bit more blood palettes in there. I'm just gonna deal with this one. Same story. Her skin tone is a little bit more red. Doesn't get past 640, and it's 128. We just go in this one, even though this is a little bit dark. Because it's darker, you can't really see a lot of information, but it doesn't even get past the 640. But basically, when you look at the skin that is bright and dark, they retain the same information. The only difference is that little bit of brightness that goes between 512 and 640. So even this one. So if I take this image and let's just say I'm gonna go down on the highlights on the game, and then I'm gonna show you how it looks like. Just gonna go down on the highlights a little bit. Just gonna take us to. Just want to show you something that's kind of cool. Give me a moment. Where's that? It's not working. It's okay. I'm going to show you another one. So we're just going to go into this one. I want to show you something. Oh, I think I know what's happening. My Davinci Resolve just froze on me. Just okay, we're back. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're just going to go back and look at these skin tones again. So even though they have like darker skin tones, but the color is kind of the same. It's still in the 640s and it doesn't go below. And you look at this one, even though this is a very dark image, 512, and it doesn't go close to zero. This one, the same story. So what that tells you is no matter what the color of the skin is or whatever they're doing with the skin, they follow the same format, regardless of the actor, regardless of the settings. If they want something that looks a little bit dark, so if you're having, let's say, if you're shooting your video and you're having the lights going out on one side, you want your shadows to be in this zone, so between 0 and the 512, and you want the area which is visible, which is directly in the light, you want it to be between the 512 and 640. Does that make sense? Okay. So basically now we pretty much just covered a lot of different examples from Hollywood, and they're doing the same thing. Maybe we can apply that to our videos as well. And I actually got this lovely lady over here. Just wanted to show you a little bit of how we can actually start to apply some of what we learned. And let's see if we can show you by example, maybe it will make sense. So this one is not edited. And what I want to do is I just want to show you how I can go ahead and edit it if it was just for me. If you're familiar with Photoshop, basically you can take an image and go and add a little bit different filters on top to change the colors. If you're using Lightroom, Lightroom does something very similar. Like you have your image, and then on the side, you have all of these different tabs and dials that you can go ahead and change the colors, add a little bit of contrast, and play around with everything else. Davinci does the same thing, but because it's a moving image, we're not just talking about one instance of an image. Everything has to make sense. So when you get any of your clips, it's always a good idea to pick your hero shot. The hero shot is going to be the shot that has a lot of correlation to the whole clip, and it kind of makes perfect sense. So let's just say, like, I have this clip has similar lighting, but let's just say, for example, you're shooting two different scenes. You have one light on, and then you decided in the middle of the shoot you're just gonna turn on one light. So it'll probably make a lot of sense to kind of split your clip into two halves and edit the one with one light separate than the one with two lights. So that way, the grade that you applied in the first clip doesn't affect your second clip. And that way you can make them match and you can do a lot of work with them. So moving with that, now we're knowing that we're gonna treat this as if it was Lightroom, and we're just gonna go ahead and treat it as such. With Lightroom, what it does is, like, you can go from top to bottom, and I'm actually gonna show you Lightroom to see if that makes sense to you. And once you figure out the way to make Davinci look exactly like Lightroom, things will look a little bit easier to manage. Because to be honest, when I started using the nodes, I was feeling a little bit lost because I'm so used to how Photoshop and Lightroom and all of the other programs work, and I just didn't understand why the hell would they go ahead and use a node system. But later on, I found out that this is what Hollywood is using for most of the stuff, and they can do a little bit more complicated grades with it, and that's why they started using any of that. So for example, I have this, and every single time we just say this is reset, and that's a trap. So with everything you do with Lightroom, it feels like you're adding a layer every single time you do something. So if you treat that as if like every dial is a layer, then you can apply that to Davinci. What do I mean? So going back here, I'm just gonna do a right click and add a node. And I'm just gonna keep adding nodes. And I'm gonna treat every node as if it was one dial from Lightroom. So I'm just gonna have a node just for temperature. I'm gonna have a node for tints, one for exposure, one for contrast, and moving forth. When obviously I don't need to use everything on Lightroom to color grade an image. So I'm gonna apply the same thing for Davinci. So what I usually do is I leave the first node and I don't touch it, because this one is just my backup plan if I messed up on something. I use this one and I do my highlights. So I'm just gonna add the label and I'll say this is highlights. Okay. And the highlights is basically me going into the wheels, in the primary wheel, and go and try and adjust my scope. So I'm just going to go into that and play with my highlights. And when I do the highlights, I usually just do, okay, I'm just going to do this one as well, just to get my scopes to where I want it. When we watch this one, I noticed that they have it at 896. So I wanted to apply something similar. So for here, I'm just going to go into my game and go to 896. Okay. The next one is, I'm just going to go into my log, and I'm just going to say that this one is my log wheel. And the log wheel, basically, I just want to go into my shadows. And I usually like to lift up my shadows. So I can have it two different ways. I can either go into my shadows from here and raise up my shadows a little bit. And I can just show you how it looks if I take this node out. It's very, very, very faint look. And I press Control D, or I can just press in here one time, and I can just disable that node. Okay. And the next one is my color balance. So the color balance is where I use my temperature and tints. So let's say I wanted to give it a little bit more blue and slightly green. And basically, I just kind of did a very, very basic adjustment to what the image looks like. And this is how it looks before and after. Okay. But now I want to go and look into what my skin tones are going to look like. So what you can do is you can look into here and you can see, well, I already have most of my stuff is in the purple because she's wearing purple, but I want to just know how the skin tone is going to look like. There's something called the isolator and the qualifier. So the qualifier works as you pick a color and this color is going to only be visible on your screen. So let's just say I'm going to click here. I just want to go on the forehead and click and drag. And by pressing by pressing Shift H or pressing this button over here, it will just going to show you what color I highlighted. And I just wanted to go and see how that color is going to look related to the whole image. And if I look here, because this is in an outside setting, I have my red already high and everything seemed like it's a little bit balanced. But let's just say if I wanted to take that color and give it a little bit more contrast. So now that I isolated that color, I'm just going to click here. And whatever I do to that color is going to affect this side. It's not going to affect anything in here. So I'm just going to go into the contrast. You see, it's not affecting anything in the image. It's only affecting. And this is a very, very powerful tool that you can have, especially in this program, because you can just select the specific color tone and change it. So let's just say I wanted to change. I'm going to reset this node. Just going to delete it. Let's just say, for example, I wanted to change the color of purple. So I'm going to go in here. And you know what? I don't want purple. I want it to look green. So I just go into my hues and change it. Go in here. And now I change that into green. Let's just say I wanted to change the whole thing. So I can just go in here and I drag. And now I change her whole thing into green. And you can just play around with it and see, like, let's make it more red. And that's how you can see a lot of people do that when they go and change colors in like, let's say, like I can do like, hey, you can see this is a blue, and then you can do this, and I can have a different clip, and I can change that color into green or yellow or whatever. So this is one way that people can control a different color and change the whole thing. But proceed with caution, because when you overdo it, when you take that image and put it in a bigger screen, yeah, actually people, I was watching a video where someone actually only had one LED light in the background, and he wanted to have two different colors, but he couldn't have it. So what he did was he used the same technique, and he just isolated the color of one side and changed the color from blue to a little bit like orange. So he had orange on one side and blue on the other side. And he pretty much faked that he had an LED light in the back. I don't know about green chickens, but I like him purple. But yeah, this is pretty much how you can isolate the color. But this is only one way of isolating the color. I will gonna show you another way you can isolate a color. So when you go into the curves, you can isolate the color in different ways. So you can go into your, in here, you have a lot of different tabs. And these tabs, pretty much whatever you see is in here is the same as in there. But the only thing is it's a little bit different the way it behaves, because this one is like a wheel, but that one can act as like a, you can isolate different colors. Let me show you what I mean. So we're just gonna go into, gonna click in here, and we're gonna go into the hue versus hue. For example, I just want to isolate her skin. I want her to, sorry Rita, I have to do this. I want her to look like an alien, for example. I'm just gonna go down and give her like a group. Well, she looks like the Hulk now, but that's not what I'm trying to do. And again, I pay for this later, I know. So basically what I did is I selected the colors from here to there, and I only want to manipulate the red and the yellows, and I'm going to change those hues so I can just go back and forth. Let's just say I want to just isolate this one, which is, and I can just move this a little bit to whiten down the colors. And now I can just change it into like maybe green or red or yellow, and I can just do that. And that's one way to isolate colors. Oh, oh wow, okay, yeah, Gamora, I'm sorry. Gamora it is. But that's basically how you can manipulate the colors. But now let's just go into the skin itself and how you want to manipulate the skin. So now that you have the image and you can see that it's well balanced compared to what we've seen with Hollywood, you can try and change that skin a little bit more. So what you can do is you can just go back to the qualifier and select the skin. And now like what you can do is like you can, I find it easier if you select the forehead and click and drag until you find it. And when you do that, sometimes you have a collateral and you can pick other colors. But if you go down here, you can adjust the colors that you want to pick. So let's just say I don't want to pick any more purple. So I'm moving away from the purple, and I got away from that. But let's just say like I have a little bit of noise. So I can just go, I'm just gonna turn this off for now. In here, you have a little bit more adjustments. You have something called denoise, which in result, it kind of removed a lot of that. So if I go back to 0, so it kind of gives it a little bit of a cleaner look when you move. And I have something called clear and black. So it kind of removes the absolute numbers or colors in there. And I can just move a little bit away with saturation just to kind of finesse the look that I want to get. And I just say I want it to get a little bit of that. And that's how you can adjust that. And now that I have my skin isolated, I can go and change it. So I can click here and just say I wanted to give it a little bit of brightness. So I can just give it a little bit more brightness. And I wanted to give it a little bit more contrast. So I'm just going to go down to here and give it a little bit of shadow. But that's pretty much how you would go ahead and isolate the skin and see. And now if you go back in here, you want to see how it looks. I think I went a little bit too far with that. So I can just go back into my game and put it down. And then go here. Everything kind of looks similar. So if you wanted to see like how it looks before and after, I can just go right click, grab still, and go into my gallery. And so this is before and after. So on the left side was before and the right side is after. And what I've done is I tried to get some information back in the image because it was very, very bright. And I wanted to give it a little bit of cooler look. We can try another image. So let's just say you wanted to do, let's just say I wanted to make this look like it's a little bit of a sunset. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add a lot more nodes. So I'm just going to keep adding nodes. We're going to do the same thing. And I just wanted to make this look a little bit more darker and moody. So what I can do is I can just look into some of the ones that I want to mimic. So let's just say this one. I like how this one looks. And I'm going to try and do something similar. So I notice on the side that they prioritize the reds a lot more, and then greens and then blues. So I'm going to try and mimic that into my image. So using the same way, I'm just going to go in here and do that. Going to go into my game, my lifts, just going to go down. I'm just trying to isolate it. And I can just do that. So this one is the highlights. And this one is the primary. Then I go into here, I can click my primary log. And I want to play around with how my highlights can look. So I want to make it a little bit more red. So I can just go in here. And you see, like, as soon as I change that red, the red is actually being separated from the scope and the whole image is going. Okay. And if you do that in here. And I'm going to go into here and go back and see if I can do that. I can. This one is only for highlights. Yeah, I already, that's why I write it down, because I almost went back and I changed the colors, which I don't want to. I want to change the colors when I do it later. So this one is only for my contrast. And that's why I have the system to catch me doing something that I don't want to. So back, let's say if I make a mistake, I know that this one only controls my high and low points. I don't do any color in this one. And this one is for my log wheels. And I do all of my changes in here, which I already did. And I want to give myself a little bit of orange shadow. And now I want to go into this one is my next one, which is my color and temperature. So I'm just going to do that and say temperature. And I just want to give it a little bit of orange and a little bit of magentas. But notice something happened here. We actually kind of went overboard with our waveform because we started to add colors. So what I can do is I can go into my highlights and go back to my wheel and go down to bring it back to where I want it. And that way, like you can always change the colors, but if something goes out of hand, you can go back and fix it later. So that way, this one controls your high and lows all of the time. And I notice here that my blue is actually way over. So I just went down here. Okay. And now I'm just gonna go into the next one. And this one is going to be my skin tones. So I'm just gonna do the same thing. And you notice here that my skin tones are way, way blown up. So what I can do is I can just go in here and go back. Let's see. So this one is a little bit more reasonable, but I can just go into there and but this is very, very extreme. See, you can't do that. So we'll probably have to redo it again. And most of it is trial and error to see what you can do. But now that we've seen that this linear system does not work, it's time to actually do something different. This is like very, very like very, very advanced grading. Like if you wanted to do something like that. So now that we're doing this, we're gonna do something a little bit different. So what we've done with the temperature here, I don't want the temperature to affect my skin tone too much. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm just gonna add another node, and I'm gonna add a layer node. What the layer node does, it actually overrides anything that I have in there, and it acts like its own thing. So if I add anything in this node, it overrides that temperature. And if I turn this off, it kind of adds like it's just another layer, but it overrides everything. So what I usually use this for is I try and use that for my skin. So I can just go into my skin. And as soon as I click the skin, you notice that the background have changed because what I'm doing here is I'm only affecting the skin, but I'm not affecting the color. So now when I do that, I can see that my skin is already a little balanced that I had before. So that way I don't have to do any changes to make it different. So I'm just gonna clean it up. Go here. And now this one, it looks a little bit too red for my liking. So I just go back into my temperatures, do that. And with this one, I can just go and add a little bit of lift. And now this one looks a little bit more like she's in. It looks like she is in a little bit of a sunset, but if let's say if I wanted to add a little bit more red, I can just go into the next one and add, let's say in the game, I want to add a little bit more orange and give it a little bit of a moody look. And it will be something closer to that. And now if you want to see like before and after, so this is how it looks before, and this is after. And that's pretty much like how you can manipulate an image in Davinci as well. There are a lot of different techniques that you can do grade. And this is like a very, very basic just infrastructure of how the nodes work and how you can do to manipulate. Like let's say I edited this one earlier and I edited this one earlier. They all look very different, but you can just keep playing and trial and error until you find the look that you like, and then you can apply it. Does anyone have any questions, or if there's anything that you guys have that you want to see me do or try and explain more?
Cams, you're muted.
Yeah, I feel like Cam's was very, very dramatically asking a question then.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh.
damn it.
Uh-huh.
Right, say you've got a look that you love, you've got all of these nodes. How do you save that as a LUT so that you can then apply it to another shot with similar environment and lighting?
Okay, so basically, let's just say you have the look that you like. Let's say it's this look that we liked. It was the very, very clean, and I can just right click on my clip, generate a LUT,
Oh, okay.
and it will just generate it with my fingers. And then I just generate it and I can save it. And it just saves it into my LUT. But I'm gonna show you, like I showed you a very, very complicated way to do something, right? But I'm gonna show you something that's very, very simple and anyone can do with Davinci. Let's just say you have this clip and you wanna grade it really, really quickly, or in a hurry, you have to upload your video. If you know your make and model of your camera, and you already know that you're shooting in a log or a very flat profile, you can go into the LUT section, and I'm just going to expand this a little bit. You can go to where you have the camera. So let's just say I'm using a Sony. I can just go into the Sony, double click, and they already have the presets already done for me. So I'm just going to add a new note. Just going to add a new note. And I'm just going to add, because I shot this in S-Log, and I added right away, and it already kind of did the grade for me. But let's just say sometimes they do the grade and it looks very, very harsh. And I don't want to use 100% of the grade. I just want to use like 50% or 30%. There's something here called the key. And the key is the input of the node to the image. When you click that, you have the gain, which is the input. I can just say 0.5, and that is going to be 50%. And now I can just increase it or decrease it the way I like it. And this could act as a full grade if you like, or it could be like a base of what you want to do. Because sometimes when you, let's just say, for example, this one, and I just want to start over. When you shoot in a very flat profile, everything kind of looks very gray. And to do that, you have to add a little bit of saturation, and you need to add a little bit of contrast to make the image look a little bit cohesive. But what the LUT does for you, it changes your grade from normal to Rec 709. Rec 709 is just for TV grading, and this one is going to be like a very, very quick shortcut for you to do it. Let's just see. I think my thing is acting up again. And basically, you can just go. Let's just say you're using a Canon. I can just go in here and get a Canon LUT, and I think I deleted the Canon LUT, or I put it somewhere else. Well, shame on me. So, but basically, what it does is that it comes with different LUTs that you can download, or even if you downloaded the NUT that you want, and you can just drag and drop that LUT directly, and it will just gonna change it for you. So, and if we wanted to add something extra, let's say the LUT is too dark, you just add another node and go ahead and do the same thing that we did. So you wanted to add the gain, or say, oh, it's actually clipping at the bottom, or I want it to be a little bit more dramatic, you can do that. Does that make sense? Oh, that's cool. But yeah, that's pretty much how I would go in and grade something. And this is like a very, very quick overview of how Davinci Resolve kind of works, and how it color grades an image, and why a lot of people are using it, because like this is just a drop in the sea that you can do with Davinci. And there's a lot more that I'm still learning about every day that I'm doing. And I usually just go in and just start shooting anything that I see, and go home and start to practice with it and play around. And I found that this website is really, really cool, called Film Grab. And Film Grab does, like, I just go in and download any image that I like from any movie, and I just go in and study how the image look. And I found that the more time I spend looking in these, I have like an understanding of how they color grade their images. And I think one of the best things is, like, sometimes you go into like if you have a good YouTuber, you can go in and take a screenshot of how they look, and take that screenshot and put it into DaVinci Resolve and look into the scopes and see how they prioritize which colors. And that way, when you know which colors they prioritize, you can go ahead and apply it to your own video. But just keep in mind, sometimes you can download a lot from a YouTuber, and whatever you do, you cannot get the same look. And the reason is because the image is all about light, and the temperature of the light comes in. The temperature acts as an external color. So if you don't have the exact same temperature as them, exact same distance, you're gonna have difference in your exposure. You're gonna have difference in your color, and you're gonna also have difference in your shadows, because the way they put the light, you know, I have the light shown up at like almost like an 80-degree angle. I have a lot of shadows on this side of my nose, but if I put that light this way and I have it soft, it's gonna look a little bit different. So color grading is just one aspect of the whole thing. The most important thing is to actually get your light setup pretty much nailed down to the T, especially if you're buying a lot from any of the like, let's say, the YouTubers. You have to study how they apply the lighting into their system. Otherwise, you cannot get the same results. And we've seen that with a lot of people where they bought like the Peter McKinnon LUT, or they bought the Olier LUT, but they can't get the same look, because what you don't notice is, like, he has a very specific look in his background. He has a very, like, let's say Euler, for example, he has a very gray, uh, monotone background. Everything look the same color. And if I'm having a blue color, it's not gonna look very similar. I might have my skin tone look the same, but my background is not gonna match. And that's the whole thing. Like, let's say if you're trying to match Ali Abdel's look, it will probably make sense to have that same light that he has, so you can have the cyan color, the blue color on one side, and have the orange color on the other side to make it match. And you can see that with Bav. Like, Bav, I think, matched his color very well, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. But if you try and change the color in your background and apply the LUT, you're gonna see something that doesn't look very, very, something gonna look a little funky, because the colors are not gonna behave the same. And one last thing is, even though you have already applied and already color graded your look, when you apply, let's just say you want to create a LUT, and take that same um, video. Let's say you're shooting a video next week, and take that LUT and slap the LUT on your video. You might get completely different results. The reason is the LUT is only applied as one layer. If you have a very complicated node system, let's just say, for example, I'm just going to show you one. I'm going to show you one of the ones that I've done. Okay, let's just say, for example, I'm just going to open this video that I've done a few weeks back, and I'm just going to show you a little bit of that, how that layer system works. Just let it load. Okay, so I'm just gonna close this down. Okay, and you can see that I have a little bit of the advanced node tree, and the reason is I was trying to isolate. So in here, I was trying to isolate my skin tones, and on top of that, I added another layer to try to get a little bit more orange and green rather than the normal orange and blue. So I tried to do experiment a little bit with it. If I create this as a LUT, this whole thing is going to look a little bit funky because where you're applying the color to your skin is not going to translate the same, because the next time you're shooting, the light might not be the same intensity, or the light might be a little bit in a different angle, or maybe I don't know, something happened with the light, the color temperature changed. The whole thing is not going to work really, really well. So the one thing I found is if I actually can copy the whole node tree instead of making a LUT, is going to be a lot more advantageous for you. So you can just keep that node, and I can just copy that whole node, just right click and copy. And that way, or I just control C. And let's say I'm just gonna go into this one. I'm just gonna go and delete everything. And you can notice like, oh God, this is a very bad look. But yeah, for this one, it looks like that. But let's say I just wanna, so you can just copy and paste. And now it's gonna look very, very similar. But I'm just gonna try and show you how it's gonna look if I apply that as a LUT. So I'm just gonna generate the LUT. I'm gonna call it the color grading example. Okay. And now I'm gonna go in here, and thanks a lot, man. You look funny. So I'm just gonna go here and do the color grading example. Okay, just give it a moment. It's just, I have a lot of files open, so it's just gonna take a minute. Okay, there we go. Finally. Okay, so now you see when I applied the LUT in here, the color looks a little bit washed out compared to this one. I lost a bit of contrast and I lost a little bit of color in the back. And that's what happens when I try and apply a LUT directly to the image rather than applying the node. And you notice that that's why when you see a lot of, let's say, like Peter McKinnon and Maddie, when they apply the LUT, they don't just apply the LUT and call it quits. I remember in one of Maddie's tutorials, he used the LUT as a base. He didn't use the LUT as this was the holy grail. This is, I'm just going to do that and it's going to simplify my workflow. What they do is they just say, I really like how this node tree works. I can just select the clip that I want and go to whatever I want to apply, and then right click here. And then I can say apply grade. And what that does, it just copies everything that I've done from my grade that I've done before, and it applies the whole thing in there. So what I usually do is, for example, I just go into my, in here, and I just copy the clip, and I go up here and go into my other, sorry, it's just like a little bit. So when I go up here and just copy that clip into my workflow for another edit, and then I copy that and apply the grade from there. And that way it's kind of like an extra step that I do, but rather than me trying to retrace my steps back into the nodes, I just go in here and copy paste. And what I have is I have this node in here. And when I go into the color grading tab, it's just in here. And then I go right click and apply. And basically what I have is that I applied the whole node tree into my workflow. So what I have is, like, let's say I already have that look that I always like. I usually go on, when I open my Davinci Resolve, I go into my older files that I already graded. I copy a clip, like maybe one frame of that clip, and then I use that as a base for my next video. And then as soon as I finish editing, I just go in there and then select all of the clips that I want, and then right click on the clip that I have that one frame, and then apply grade. And now I applied that grade for all of the clips that I have. And you can see that over here. The same thing, let's say if you want to reset, you can just go into just there, and then you can just right click here and apply grade. And when you apply grade, it just copies a node to node. And that's pretty much, I think, like I want to say quick and dirty, but it was not really quick. But this is like an overview real quick of what is the color grade and what is the difference between that and a LUT, and what is LUT really, like what is the capabilities of the LUT, and what is the, I would say, like the downfalls of the LUT, because the LUT doesn't really do anything to skin. The LUT is just an overall look. But as you see, like when we tried to add the LUT to my picture, the whole thing kind of made it look very monotone. So the LUT is just going to fix the colors overall, but when it comes to your skin tone, it might actually do you more harm than good. But it's always it's a good idea to have it as a base to start with. Is there any questions or anything that you guys wanted me to explain better? Because I know I jumped into a lot of things, so it's a little bit too advanced in a way. The node system is confusing.
I think for me, you've given me the knowledge so I can go and play around with it, because I played around with it before a little bit and didn't have any of the sort of knowledge, so I was going in blind and didn't get anywhere and thought I'd never touch it ever again. But like, it's the way you've explained it and stuff makes me want to go in and play around with it a little bit more. So yeah, does anybody have any questions? Can I ask a question that's not to do with colour? So, you know, you said about your system and how you edit with a system. Is that in your Skillshare course? By the way, he has a Skillshare course, just saying, if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I have a Skillshare course about color grading, and I think I explained it a little bit. I had more examples on there, and oh, thanks, Ruben. And yeah, I pretty much go through the system. So basically, I try and keep all of my nodes the same. So let's say if I wanted to go and retrace my steps, I always know what to do. So I always know that this first node is related to highlights. The second node is related to shadows. And this node is all the colors. So I usually have the first node is to control my background. I have this node control my skin, and this one is to control the overall look. And then this one is if I wanted to add a little bit extra color or contrast. And this one is if I wanted to fix something at the end of the whole thing. Let's say I have, this one was, like, let's say, for example, I have this one. If you're still seeing my screen, like they added this, I found that my whole grade was a little bit on the darker side of the spectrum. So I added an extra node at the end to lift it up a little bit. And I thought, oh wait, it's still kind of dark. So I wanted to add something slightly, but it's not very visible, but it's just like me being a little bit like so, you know, like anal about it. I just wanted to get something out. But yeah, like basically it's just like, that's how I usually do it. I go with the highlights, and then I go contrast color, then do my background, then do my skin, then overall adjustments, and then see if I wanted to touch something on the shadows, I do it later. And overall look, if I wanted to add something like a little bit more color, if let's say for example, like this one is a little bit too green, I can just add another node and say, you know what, this is too green, I'm just want to balance it out, I'm just going to add a little bit of orange to it, and now it's a little bit more balanced. But yeah, that's just up to your preference and what you look you're trying to get. And I do the same thing even with my editing, really, like Esther. Like I try and, for example, if I'm trying to work with something, I get my ear roll first and cut my ear roll to everything that I'm trying to do. And then, okay, now I've finished my ear roll, everything. I know that even if I submit the video, I don't need to worry too much about the B-roll, because I know that I have all of my points done. And the B-roll will be like the icing on the cake. Okay, so I'm gonna put some B-roll here to, like I have a jump cut. Okay, so I'm gonna put a B-roll at the jump cut to make it look a little bit more, give it more flow. And okay, so now I finished this. So how about I work on the intro? So now I go work on the intro to, like, I just take it one step at a time and try and improve my ear roll. So the ear roll is my base. And then, okay, so now I can work on the B-roll. Okay, how about you do an intro? Wait, maybe I can add text in here. And that way, if I start working as, let's say, I'm just going to talk about, like I wanted to go and use my mouse, but if I just going to say that and then go ahead and keep going detail, I might lose the whole like overview of my whole project, because the whole project is not just me like clicking or using my mouse. The whole overview is like actually moving the mouse to one place A to B, and that way I can just try and work on the whole thing and then just zone it down little by little, rather than just going from area, finishing it. Now this is 100%, but I'm trying to work on the whole thing as a general. So let's just say, God forbid, I cannot finish the video, I can just upload it, and I know it's still going to be cohesive.
If you were doing a vlog style video where the A roll isn't Ruben just like going straight in when he heard vlog style. So like, you know, when you're doing a vlog style, because you know you said you got your A roll and you rough cut your A roll. But when you're doing a vlog style video, you don't have either so much A-roll, or you might have like a vague introduction of A-roll, but then it's all kind of B-roll-y type thing. Would you just rough cut the B-roll into a story and then...
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying, because when you do a vlog style, it's everything kind of flows. There is no start and end. It's like the whole thing is the one thing, correct? And you're trying to do, let's just say, like you're trying to go and let's say you're working on, you're making furniture. You're talking about the furniture, and then you go to your workshop, get your saw and do this, and then in the middle you're still talking in the middle of it. Is that like kind of what you're asking? Like how do you isolate this and that?
Yeah, so like for Ruben, he would possibly start out saying, I'm going to do a video on how I feed my chickens. And then he'd have a B-roll of a chicken being fed. He might then say, like, this is how I did the food for the chicken. But it's all like, so it's so At the moment, I'm videoing short clips, and then it's trying to get those short clips into a story line that gets all messy. I think that's my question.
Okay.
My
Actually,
question changed as it was being asked.
no, it's good. I'll show you something what I do with you. So let's just say for like what I do is let's just say if you're doing a vlog style, some of the clips that you have are mandatory for your story, mandatory for your script. But then other stuff that you already filmed are, I would say you can call them B-roll. So what you can do is I don't know if you do that, but I usually just put stuff that I know like are mandatory. I put them in the A-roll folder, and the stuff is for the B-roll folder. I have like music, and I have the stuff that are already processed that I don't need to color grade. Then I have the pictures. Let's say this one is for the camera, so I have just pictures of the camera. So what I would say, what I would do is I would take all of the stuff that are mandatory, and I have to go through them before I even put them into my editing program and organize them into different folders. And that way, if I put them into my editing, I just take that whole folder and drag it into my editing and start editing that. And let's just say, for example, you're explaining something as you're doing, that would still be your ear roll because it's very important. Like you're feeding a chicken, that's part of your ear roll. But let's just say you are showing like a picture of like let's just say the sun. I was like, oh, it's a very beautiful weather, and then all of a sudden, like you're talking about something and you have a very beautiful sunset coming. You can just have that as your B-roll, or you're cutting a log. Let's say you have a bunch of, let's say 20 minutes of you like cutting logs, for example. That could be a B-roll because you're not talking over it. So everything you're talking over is a B-roll. The B-roll is just you doing something that is adding to your story, but is not mandatory to make it cohesive. Does that make sense?
I think I was thinking of it as different. Like I was thinking A-roll as in the studio talking, and B-roll as like chit-chatting, which is wrong because that's the A-roll because it's important to the story. So yeah, and then you can smash all of your A-roll together and then try and make a story out of it then, which is your rough cut A-roll, and then just add the B-roll. Yeah.
Yeah, just like have you noticed there's a lot of videos that kind of like almost like a documentary style where their A-roll is really your voice and the whole video is B-roll. But think of it this way: if you listen to this video in a podcast format, would that still make sense?
It's like Veronica doing her cacti. It's all voiceover.
Yeah.
So it's actually the video is all B-roll. The A-roll's just the audio voiceover.
So that's pretty much it. So if you can get, so it doesn't matter what your A-roll is. Your A-roll is what is important for your story. As long as you have your A-roll makes sense. Like if I turn off my screen and I can still listen, that is my A-roll, if it makes sense. Everything else that comes, it just enhances the experience. That's how I look at it.
How do you organize your B-roll and your B-roll library? Do you, for each video, do you have a separate folder for the video and then have a B-roll library that you just import in, or do you like, what's your file structure system, I think is what I'm saying.
I usually shoot the B-roll specific for the video. So far, like I didn't grow my library enough because I'm like this. Let's just say for for most of the stuff, let's say if I'm looking at an iPad, then I can just shoot that and create a B-roll library just for me doing iPad. So you can do that and structure it that way. But because of my videos so far, I haven't had anything that was repeated, except for myself. So that was the only thing that's repeating. So I just go out and shoot a specific B-roll for that video. And I just put that in a folder, and I know that now I have, if you can still see my screen, like I have for these videos, I have for each one of those, I have a B-roll in there. So each of my videos, let's say if I wanted to get a B-roll from a specific video, I can just go into that folder and take that B-roll out of it. And it's going to be, I know it's going to be there. But I don't have a universal B-roll, if that's what you're asking. I don't have that yet. But maybe that's something I need to do for future videos.
I've started doing that in Davinci using the master bin, which you can share across different projects. And I'm using Davinci's tagging system to tag my B-roll shots. And it worked the other day. I was looking for a shot of Clover, my basset hound, and I found one because I'd tagged it. I was like, yay. So
you know what? I haven't done that. Would you mind maybe that you can show me how you do that? I haven't used that yet, so I don't know how that works.
Would that slow the computer down because you're storing it all?
it's all just metadata that's accessing my files on my hard drive.
I'm gonna stop sharing because I honestly don't know what is that. Like what you mentioned to me seemed like it's a very cool tool to have.
It'll only take a couple of minutes to show you if you would like to see it.
Do it.
How do you know all this stuff?
It's
From
just messing around, I guess.
yeah, I think so. It's just trial and error most of the time. Everything I think I was one good project. I have like 10 that have failed. So it's just pretty yeah, it's a numbers game.
So does everyone know about the master bins, everyone who uses Davinci?
You do.
No, they're not master bins, sorry, they're power bins, they're called.
You do your like for your shorts. You do all your shorts in one project, don't you?
Yeah.
Where
I can share B-roll across all projects using the master bin.
Oh, okay.
So the master bin acts like a shortcut. Is that what it is?
Yeah, let me just gotta switch this to single monitor. Otherwise it gets unhappy with me.
Yeah, the latest update for Davinci slowed down things for me a little bit.
Oh, is that the 17.2?
It did for me as well.
I haven't installed that. Does that mean I should just hold off a little
Yeah, I
bit?
would leave it for now because it's really slowed things down for me, like big time.
Yeah, like today when I had these little stutters. I honestly never had that before. Like I just upgraded that a couple of days ago, and I noticed it was like, okay, so it looks like it's doing something, but I don't like it too much. Well, this is interesting.
Right. So I think by default the power bins are not active. So there's somewhere you have to go to switch it on in the preferences. But this power bin here, so I've got a B-roll folder. So if I go to, let's say, beach, in fact, let's search. Where's the search thing?
Across to the left a little bit.
There, right. So if I search for, no. It's not working. How did I do this? Is it in media pool?
Yeah, I think it's probably upgrade. I think it just takes like maybe 10 extra seconds for some stuff to happen.
Say beach. If I bring up metadata and then I change that to shot and scene. Oh, my search is still on. So I've tagged that with B-roll, I've tagged it with Holy Isle. B-roll and waves. So there's a keywords section over here, which you have to go up to here and change that to shot and scene, because by default it's going to be at clip details. So you bring up shot and scene. You can also color code them. So I've done that with, if I go to Whitey Woods down here. And what happens is when you choose a B-roll, I've got music in here as well. And when you drag something from a power bin into your project, it basically duplicates that file into your project bin up here. So it doesn't move it from the master bin, it keeps it where it is. So you can basically, if I want to switch down here and go into my shorts project. So that power bin is still there in my shorts project. And I can access it. It's just tagged as B-roll. So I haven't tagged everything yet. But yeah, this worked when I was looking for dogs the other day. I can't seem to replicate that right now. Ah, right, yeah. It doesn't search subfolders, which is really annoying. Like Lightroom does. Davinci does not. I don't know why.
So you'd have to have thousands of it in one folder for it to be.
Yeah, it's kind of having a hierarchical structure makes it fail a little bit. So there, search for Poppy. And it's finding these files which are named Poppy, but they're also tagged with Poppy. Poppy's my Akita. So then I would just drag that into my timeline, which would then duplicate that file into that project as well. So when you go to your projects,
Can't you shift select all the bins to search them all at once?
that's a good question. Yeah, you can. Oh, fudging genius, Ruben. I don't think I've tagged Clover. Yeah, that's the gist of it. And the idea of smart bins is brilliant. So I've got all my sound effects, not smart bins, master power bins, all my sound effects, all the music that I use, my subscription button, animations, titles that I've created myself.
So organized, shit.
So that's the other thing, when you create a title that's based on a template and you edit it, so if you change the font and all of that, you can then drag that title back off the timeline into the master, into the power bin, and it will save it with all of your changes. And then you can just reuse that over and over and over. So that's how I do my end screens now. And I know the exact coordinates to make my video, to zoom my video down to that size, and to place it, I've got the numbers written down in my notebook. So I just key in the numbers and it automatically places my video in the rectangle here.
Also, you take the video from the last one and make it smaller. You don't let YouTube,
YouTube will fix. YouTube picks these ones that go in the two little rectangles. That's part of the end screen. But my own video for the last 20 seconds, I will cut it and then shrink it down
See.
and zoom it into that box over there. That's what Gerald Undone does. I was just basically trying to copy what he was doing. And this is what I came up with.
This is amazing.
So if I can open up, I'll need to go back into a different project. Go into my main one. I'll show you my most recent video, how I did that. If it ever loads.
While that's loading, Moss, can I ask you a really quick question? So I'm totally devoid of taste and I don't know what looks good. So if I wanted to start color grading, would you recommend like just literally taking screenshots of stuff that looks decent to most people and then trying to like copy that, making adjustments for the setup that I have?
Yeah, absolutely. There is something in Davinci that if you get a picture, you can get Davinci to match the colors on that picture automatically. There is a just YouTube. You try and go on YouTube and say like, or maybe I can find it for you. Let me see if I can find it. I was just playing around with that, but I thought it was very interesting. But it didn't work for my. It didn't really work well for my shots because the way I do it, like for even for my camera, I have I'm not using like S-Log, or I'm using like a custom I would say a custom grade on my camera, so it kind of eases down my process because I don't want to keep on color grading everything that I do. So I know that this is the grade that I do if I'm shooting in this specific scenario. I just go and switch my camera to just have every colors already done, and I just do a little bit of adjustments. But if I'm shooting for a client or I'm shooting outside, I just do a flat profile, so I don't need to do a lot more work. So basically for the stuff that I already shot in the past, it didn't work because I already have the colors already pre-done in the camera. But I'm just gonna find this. It's called the Davinci Resolve color hack or something. And you pretty much grab any, I think any screenshot, and it would just match that color. And it was like with maybe 3 or 4 clicks. Sync color match. Okay. Match any shots inside. I think that's the one. Yeah. I've just put it into.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
But it's always good to, every time you record, if you're recording the same setting, it's like a natural progression that every time you're gonna work on it, you're gonna make it look better. Like if you noticed my videos from November when I started with PTOIA, you're gonna notice that my colors have changed because every time I'm like, oh wait, I found that it looks better with this color. And then the next video looks a little bit different. And now I think it's started to look more consistent, but it's just a natural progression that every time you're gonna try and repeat the process or improve, you can always improve it. As long as your camera still the same, your settings still the same, your light's still the same. And that way you can always try and replicate.
Thank you. I will try that. And thanks for the link.
Anytime. But yeah, I think this is everything that I have. If you guys have any more questions, you know where to reach me. I have a bunch of Skillshare courses related to this, and I think I explained the color grading a bit better because I tried to explain it to people who had no experience with editing whatsoever. So I went into a little bit more detail of everything, and I think it was fine. And I did edit a bunch of different clips in there as well, and I did show the advanced ways to color grade on how I color grade my latest videos. And also I went into a little bit detail of a little bit more tabs into that color grade. But today I just looked at the tab that I use normally, but with the course I just went into everything just in case if someone has like or someone else wanted to use it.
It's been fantastic, Moz. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time and for sharing all what you know with us right here, and we only know what we know. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Just wanted to reiterate that as well. I know I've been in the background quiet, but I've learned a lot. Thanks so much.
Cheers, Mo.
I do feel like I want to see the Hulk or Gamora again. Like, I feel like she did look good in green. I'm just like point out there. I feel like that. I think that truly blew my. Like, I generally did not know that you could do it. You could do that and do it. I was gonna say that easy. I think you made it look easy, but like
Quickly, just like boom.
What was the keyboard shortcut you were using to create new nodes? You seem to be doing that super quick.
It's Alt S on Windows. I think it's Command S on.
Alt S.
Yeah, and if you want to highlight and kind of no, if you wanted to disable a node is Alt D.
Oh, that's the same as disable a clip on the timeline.
Yeah.
Or was that Control D? I think that's Control D.
Yeah, one of those.
There's so many shortcuts.
I might have to switch back to Davinci.
Have you moved away from it, Ruben? I didn't know that.
I've got the student subscription to Adobe Creative Cloud because I'm a student now.
Yeah, I have that too. I never touch it though.
Yeah.
Lightroom only. That's the only Adobe thing I use.
Yeah. So what if I want to? You touched on this, but what if I want to like copy a certain feel or a certain look? Like if I want to go like more a rustic or a more old school look, if I want to copy someone else's videos, how do I do that? Can I just like take a still like you've done with the movies and then watch the curves and try to mimic it, or can I like copy and paste? Or
the best way is to mimic it, but the link that I sent, I think you can. Davinci is going to already kind of apply the colors. So like, hey, you're using a lot more greens than blues, and it's just gonna apply that. But the problem is, it's not gonna be effective 100%. It might work. It might work for landscapes. I would say this will be the thing. But when it comes to skin tones, I think skin tones add a lot, like another layer of complexity, because it's just too much to work with. You notice the same thing with the Lightroom. If I have a preset for Lightroom, and if I'm shooting a landscape, I'm pretty sure I can use that for everything else. I said as soon as I put a face in the equation, everything kind of goes. And skin tones are probably the hardest thing to try and replicate from shot to shot. But you can definitely give it a try and see if it might work with your examples.
Yeah, okay.
But that's it, I think.
Alrighty, I'm going to stop the recording here.